Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy and Nate, and today we are going to be discussing a new tropical update which concerns the recently designated Tropical Storm Bill, as well as Invest 92L, which could create impacts for the Gulf of Mexico. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to subscribe because I do upload videos almost every single day. I will be updating you all more and more as we get closer and closer to the situation. Also, leave a like to help me out with YouTube's algorithm so that we can send this out to more and more people, and share this with friends and family and people on social media so that they may get the information that they may need. I also have timestamps in the video discussing, or at least creating chapters more or less as to what parts I'm going to be talking about specifically. So we will be talking about the tropical weather, but I do want to quickly discuss the severe weather threat for most of the United States here over the next 3 days. But if you guys want to skip ahead, feel free to do so. So we do have a 1 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here in this dark green, which is for portions of the Carolinas all the way down into the deep south. We also have a marginal risk up into portions of Montana, North Dakota, or at least extreme southwestern parts of North Dakota, western parts of South Dakota, northwestern parts of Nebraska. And so if you guys live in those areas, highly advise you watch out for that. This light green here is more or less a thunderstorm risk. So it's not saying that you won't get severe weather, but it's just saying it's extremely unlikely. If we take a look at the parameters here, the hail outlook is indicating a 5% chance in brown over here for these areas along the Carolinas, as well as in the northern plains. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 1-inch size hail or larger. If we take a look at the wind outlook, it's definitely a lot more expansive down here in the south, or especially in the south and east. But you still also have that 5% chance over there in the northern plains. So whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 58-mile-per-hour winds or greater within a 25-mile radius. Not a huge tornado threat here today. It's less than 2% actually. So it's not a 0% chance, but it is definitely below designation worthy according to the Storm Prediction Center. Now, if we take a look at our high temperatures here for today, first things first, what screams out at me the most is that places here in Montana and the Rockies are screaming hot. I mean, look at this. Triple digits across the board here. Denver getting to 100. Places in Arizona, even near the Grand Canyon, at around 120. You also have some places here from Sacramento all the way down to Bakersfield and even LA getting in upwards of 90s to almost triple digits in some spots. And these areas over here that need so much rain, doesn't seem like you're going to get it anytime soon here over the next couple of days. And it might actually get a bit worse, unfortunately. But areas over here, the west, really, really hot. Areas up here in the northwest, not as much. 60s to 70s across the board for the most parts. Maybe isolated areas up to the 80s. But for the most part, that's the northwest for you. It's going to stay relatively cool right within your area. For the most part, the United States is actually in temperatures of the 80s and 90s, almost into triple digits. So summer is really starting to come in to join the fray almost. And we're starting to see some real classic summer temperatures across the board here in the United States. The only other areas that aren't really going to be impacted as much is upstate New York and in places of New England where they could get 60s to 70s, almost 80s in some spots if you're near some of the metropolitan areas. But for the most part, everyone is feeling the heat here. Now, if we take a look at the day 2 convective outlook here, this is for Wednesday. We do have a 1 out of 5 on the severe weather scale up here in the northern plains into the Mississippi River Valley. And so if you live within that area, definitely advise that you guys monitor that with the utmost caution. But it's not a huge risk, so it's not too much of a cause for concern on a widespread scale. Now, if we take a look at the high temperatures again for Wednesday, it just gets worse for California. I mean, look at this. Triple digits across the board from Sacramento down to almost LA. Death Valley's feeling it. Grand Canyon's feeling it. Vegas is feeling it. Even areas here in the Central Plains, even into the Southern Plains, they're really feeling it. The heat is really starting to build up across the board. Even the Northwest up here, it was going to be 60s to 70s. Now it's 70s to 80s. And so on a widespread scale here for at least the western portion of the United States, even including the southern portions of the United States, very hot across the board here for the most part. And then you also have places here in the southeast, temperatures cooling off a little bit. And it's more or less because you have that cold front that was moving on through the day prior. And so a little bit of a relief here for you all. But then again, when you're down in the deep south, you guys are really kind of prepared for these hot temperatures. So it's going to be a little bit cooler than average for you all. And then the northeast into the Great Lakes is going to stay about the same, maybe a little bit warmer, but it's about the same in regards to temperatures as the day prior. Now, this is the thing that I wanted to talk about here for you all, is that there is a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here across portions of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin on Thursday. So on Thursday, there is the threat for severe weather, finally, in Iowa. So a lot of people have been in my comments who live over in Iowa and saying, hey, Nate, are we ever going to get severe weather in Iowa? Are we ever going to get severe weather in Illinois? Well, places in Iowa and northern Illinois could potentially see some action here on Thursday. And so I won't get too much into detail in that until we get a little bit closer. I do want to continue to talk about the tropics, but once we get closer and closer to Thursday, I will be making 2 separate videos, one on the severe weather analysis, another on the tropical weather, so that I may be able to get as much information out as possible for you all. But really interesting, to say the least, that there is a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here, other known as a slight risk for Thursday. And then last but not least, once again, we're going to want to take a look at the high temperatures, and basically the entire United States heats up again. I mean, the south kind of stays the same, but the northeast heats up, so now it's 70s to 80s across the board. The west is just going to continue to absolutely be hot and dry, and even places, Sacramento again, all the way down Bakersfield and into LA, it is heating up, and that is not good. This entire area is in an exceptional drought. They need rain badly, guys, and this is not looking good as a forecast in the future, that not only is it supposed to stay dry, but it's also supposed to get even drier and even hotter than that. And I'm praying for you all over there. I hope you guys get rain soon, but this is definitely not anything good to look at here from the forecast of the National Weather Service. All right, let's get into the main part of the video here, the reason why you all are here, and that is because of all the tropical activity that is happening here in the United States. And the interesting thing about this is that this is only June 15th, guys. All right, this is Tuesday, June 14th, and we are already seeing a tropical storm and 2 disturbances, with one having a high chance of formation over the next 5 days. So let's start from the lowest, work our way up. And so here's one disturbance in the MDR, or the main development region. That is basically areas in between Africa and South America, all the way over to the Caribbean. That's what they call the main development region, actually. But this does have a small chance of formation. You guys can tell these numbers over here. This just basically gives you the probabilities of formation of 2 days on the left side, 5 days on the right side. So 10% chance of formation over the next 2 days, 10% chance of formation over the next 5 days. And so not exactly expected to form, according to the National Hurricane Center, has a low chance, but still something to monitor as that continues to progress. And anything can happen with the tropics. It's very hard to forecast the tropics across the board. And so we've had multiple instances to where either track or intensity has basically flipped us on our side because something happened and we didn't forecast it. So really something that we gotta watch out for and monitor as this continues to move about. Then we also have Invest 92L. This is the tropical system that we've been talking about for quite some time. It has now been designated as a 70% chance of formation over the next 5 days, 20% chance over the next 2 days. I don't anticipate this to really start to gain tropical characteristics until the latter stages of Wednesday into Thursday, maybe even into the mid stages of Thursday as well. But there's going to be this tropical wave that's going to basically give it another shot of moisture, and it will either fan out the moisture, become a wide tropical system, or it will try to consolidate it and try to become a little bit more intense. So that's something we're going to have to watch out for, and I will show you guys what I mean a little bit later on in the video. Then we also have Tropical Storm Bill over here. This was recently designated as a tropical storm as of last night. We had a tropical depression that formed right after I uploaded my video yesterday talking about it. But just by looking at what we saw earlier and what we'll see later on, this does inhibit tropical storm characteristics. And we'll talk about where this might be heading off here later on in the video. If we also take a look at the Eastern Pacific outlook here, we have two things. We have a disturbance, and then we also have Tropical Depression Carlos. And so not as active over here in the Pacific, but we still have some sort of action. And we'll talk about this disturbance here. 0% chance of formation over the next 2 days, 40% over the next 5 days. I am anticipating this to form a little bit later on, maybe not exactly 5 days out, maybe a little bit later than that. But it will try to get its act together here pretty soon, and we'll have to monitor it, especially with the conditions around it. Conditions around it are really favorable for tropical development. And then you also have Tropical Depression Carlos over here. This was a tropical storm. Now it isn't a tropical storm. It is now a tropical depression, and it is not expected to last very long. As a matter of fact, the National Hurricane Center is expecting this to officially die out by Thursday, midday Thursday, more or less, or maybe late day Thursday, depending upon its longevity. But as of right now, Tropical Depression Carlos has a maximum sustained winds of 35 miles per hour, 1,007 millibar pressure system, moving west-southwest at 12 miles per hour. So this thing is kind of moving along. It isn't moving like substantially fast, but it's not moving substantially slow either. So this is definitely normal tropical system speeds, but it is heading off into more unfavorable environments for itself to try and survive. So it's just not forecasted to do a whole lot. Now, if we take a look at the infrared satellite, this basically tells us how high the cloud tops are by looking at the temperatures of them, because as you guys know, the higher you are in the atmosphere, the colder it typically gets. And so if we take a look at how cold the cloud tops are, that could give us an idea as to how high the thunderstorms are and how intense they are based off of how high they go up to. And so before, there wasn't really a whole lot of thunderstorms with this, but then a recent initiation of some thunderstorms around the center area of low pressure might be trying to give this a final hurrah, more or less, to try and sustain later on. But you can definitely see this swirl right within here from the low cloud level, right within here. And this definitely is inhibiting tropical characteristics, but I would not be surprised if this becomes subtropical due to the fact that there isn't as much thunderstorm activity happening around the center area of low pressure. But the next update is within the next 2 hours from me recording it, so I won't be able to give you all information regarding to that from the National Hurricane Center. But what I can do is I can show you the spaghetti models and where this is most likely going to track out to. So what we're looking at right now is the GEFS model guidance, or the spaghetti models for this. This basically gives us an idea as to where this is heading. And all these little lines is these little mini runs all enveloped within one giant run. And so by looking at this, this can give us an idea as to where Tropical Depression Carlos could go from now on. And so by looking at this, here's Hawaii up here, and one spaghetti model, only one out of 30, decides to head off to the north and west. All the others decide to keep it west or west-southwest, down into that general vicinity, south of Hawaii. And so it doesn't seem as if Hawaii will be majorly impacted by this. Even if we take a look at the Euro, this doesn't even say that this will head off to Hawaii. It says it'll mainly stay a little bit south, although it does take it a bit more of a westerly component, maybe a northwesterly component. But it still seems as if this tropical system will head a bit further to the west. And most of the models still say that this will stay well south of Hawaii. So I don't anticipate this to impact Hawaii all too much. And if it does, it basically will be one of those occasional rain windstorms that you guys have over there, but it might cause a little bit of flooding. So I definitely would watch out for that for the time being. Now let's talk about Tropical Storm Bill. All right. This is our second named storm of the season. And it's absolutely insane how we're only in the beginning of June and we've had this much activity. But Tropical Storm Bill has maximum sustained winds of 50 miles per hour, 999 millibar storm, moving northeast at 31 miles per hour. This thing is screaming to the north and east. And so just by looking at this this tropical cyclone forecast within the cone here, it seems as if the National Hurricane Center thinks that it will head just to the south of Nova Scotia, but it won't be able to get out in time, or at least deteriorate in time, before it actually impacts Newfoundland. But the good news is, with this white circle with the S in the middle, this stands for post-tropical or potential tropical cyclone. And so it'll become a subtropical storm by the time it gets over there, whereas these little black circles over here means it is a tropical cyclone, a fully tropical system. And so that's probably the good news. There isn't really going to be as much rain activity, a lot of thunderstorm activity with this, but you still could see some damaging winds over there from this tropical system. Now, if we take a look at the satellite imagery, unfortunately, we don't really have a as good of a shot here to where the tropical system's in the middle of the actual satellite image, but we still do have an idea as to what it looks like. And just by looking at this, you can clearly see the comma here with how the thunderstorms are wrapping around this tropical system. And this is a 100% bona fide tropical system right here. You can see the ventilation in the upper parts of the atmosphere, these little lines. As this extends out, you can see the band swirling in with all the storms, with all the thunderstorms rolling in. It even has a little bit of a closed area of low pressure here. And so this thing is really trying to stay alive, but it is heading into more and more unfavorable conditions for it to continue to sustain. And what I mean by that is it's lacking the warm moisture component for it to continue to become tropical. And so this might start to deteriorate with its thunderstorm characteristics here relatively soon. I would say in the latter stages of today, I would say that it would start to fully deteriorate and lose thunderstorms. But the wind component definitely will still be strong enough to where it could continue to move on through and create wind damage. Now, if we take a look at the model ensembles, the model guidance here from the GEFS, you can see here that this thing does seem to take it towards Newfoundland, similar to how the National Hurricane Center has predicted it. So people who live in Newfoundland, I'm not sure if there's anyone over there who watches my videos, but if you do know anyone who lives over there, I would highly advise that around the time frame of, say, tomorrow or latter stages of tonight, I would say that they should probably watch out for a tropical system to move on through, and that could potentially create some damaging winds for all of them. Now, with the Euro model here, the Euro models, spaghetti models are a lot smaller. The Euro actually says that this thing will probably deteriorate before then, but the Euro has been pretty inconsistent with tropical systems for quite some time, so I'm not exactly, I'm trusting the Euro more than the Canadian model, I'll say that much as of right now, but I still think that this could potentially move on through to Newfoundland, unlike what the Euro model says. And actually, if we take a look at the multi-spaghetti model guidance here with all sorts of different models basically jumbled together, they actually disagree with the Euro and say that this will continue to move on through to Newfoundland. And so basically what I'm saying is you're probably going to get a tropical system. If you don't, you're going to get the remnants of it, and you're still going to get some damaging winds. So I would still just kind of nudge someone on the shoulder who lives over there and say, hey, you might get some damaging winds. Definitely would prepare for that. Now let's take a look at the hurricane panel from the HWRF. We're going to be looking at the next 24 hours to determine as to what all is happening with this tropical system. Now, just by looking at this, this looks like a bunch of colors. It's not exactly that too appealing to look at, and a lot of you may be confused as to what all is happening, but we've got 4 different panels here, one of which is the simulated radar, which is in this box. We have another one, which is the precipitable water, which is how much water could be falling at a time. We also have the wind speed at 925 millibars, which is, in this case, relatively low to the ground, and very low to the ground. And then we also have the sea surface temperatures over here at the bottom left-hand corner. So this all can help us determine as to what all is happening with this tropical system and how this may continue to further exist in its lifespan, I should say. So by looking at this, we can see that we have a clear tropical system with moisture coming around its southeastern quadrant here. It's starting to consolidate in the northeastern quadrant here, and we got a little bit of lacking thunderstorm activity here in the southwestern quadrant, which is what we saw in the satellite imagery. And so not a whole lot of a well-balanced tropical system, but you still have some activity right here showing that we do have some thunderstorms that are trying to wrap around this, and we have some pretty strong gusty winds on the southeastern portion of this storm, so really something to kind of monitor with that. Now, as of right now, it is in decent sea surface temperatures. It's in 25 degrees Celsius sea surface temperature, which is not exactly ideal. I would want it to be 1 degree higher in Celsius, but this will have to do for right now in regards to sustainability. But if we take a look a little bit later, go into the next few frames here, you can see that this is starting to move out of that favorable sea surface temperature area and into very cooler waters, very cold waters. The winds are still there. It actually seems to intensify a little bit more as these thunderstorms start to consolidate towards the center area of low pressure. You can see it on both the precipitable water and the simulated radar. And so this does try to intensify a little bit further, but then as this continues to head further and further out to sea, you can see that the precipitable water does start to deteriorate, the radar starts to deteriorate, and the winds start to deteriorate, especially as it heads into very cold waters and upwards of 13 degrees Celsius. Speaking of sea surface temperatures, you can see here, this is the Atlantic sea surface temperatures across the board. Anywhere within the yellow, in my opinion, is somewhat favorable for tropical systems to be able to form or sustain. I would rather prefer them to be in the red or in the pink to form or sustain, but the yellows could do. It'll just not be as effective. But you can see right within here, you have these yellows that extend all the way throughout the Atlantic and even portions of the Gulf Stream right here. This is what they call this little channeled area of water, this current that flows along the side of the United States that basically gathers warm waters from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and basically pulls it up the coast. This Gulf Stream right here is basically the reason as to why Tropical Storm Bill is what it is right now. So we do have some warm waters out there for it to be able to continue to move about. And that gives me a good check mark there for that parameter. Now, if we take a look at the wind shear here, first things first, it's going to be really hard to figure out where the tropical system is. So I put a little icon here for where the tropical storm is. That's where it is as of right now. But we're looking at any sort of wind shear to be able to deter thunderstorms from actually getting towards the center area of low pressure. And we have a lot of wind shear off to the north of this. a very strong wind shear, almost in upwards of 100 knots, maybe even in upwards of 100 knots in some of those areas. And so very unfavorable wind shear off to the north of it, and seems how this tropical system is expected to move off into that general vicinity, into that unfavorable wind shear. The northern side of the storm could see less and less thunderstorms, or at least less activity with thunderstorms trying to get towards the center area of low pressure. And so that is another sign of it to potentially deteriorate as time moves on through, along with the unfavorable sea surface temperatures and moisture moving about. Now, the only thing that won't impact this is dry air. You can see there's a lot of dry air here down to the south of the northern Atlantic, more towards the equator. A lot of it over in Africa because it's a desert, but there isn't really all too much up here with this tropical system. Maybe a little bit, but not too much. And so it won't really inhibit this as this moves on through. But as I said, there are other factors that will most likely weaken this thing as this heads off towards the north and east. Now, let's talk about Invest 92L. This thing right here is what we've been talking about for quite some time. And just by looking at the satellite imagery, you can see there is a general low pressure system here within this area. Not moving all too, not exactly all too consolidated. It's very, very broad, but you can tell right within here, these clouds moving south, these clouds moving east, and these clouds moving north. So there is a very broad low pressure system here. Let me go back here. You can see very broad low pressure system that is sitting right here on the southern area of the Bay of Campeche in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, one thing I do want to make a note of here real quickly is that look at these clouds and how they shoot off to the west or to the east like this. Look at that. I'm going to play the loop again for you, and it'll show you what I mean. I keep switching over to that slide, but there you go. Look at those clouds and how they scream off to the east, and that shows you that there is a lot of wind shear in the upper parts of the atmosphere. A lot of wind shear, and so tropical systems typically don't like that. And the good news is for this tropical system is that it is not the same thing is not occurring with the main area of interest here near Mexico and the southern portions of the Bay of Campeche. But there is still something to monitor, and that is that very strong wind shear that is off to the east of it. Now, if we take a look at the spaghetti models for this, as I said, this basically gives us an idea as to where this is heading off to with a bunch of little mini runs. So it's basically a lot of little mini tracks within one giant track. And the GFS is now starting to realize the difference between this tropical system and the disturbance over in the Pacific. And so it now has, I'm sorry for blinding you all, it now has a well-confined track here with most of the spaghetti models, and it seems to make it as if most of the spaghetti models want it to stay within the Gulf of Mexico and go as far west as we'll say Houston. I've seen a couple model runs that take it over there, and as far east as, say, Panama City, all the way over to Mexico Beach. But there is still a lot of activity over there as this continues to move about, according to the GEFS from the 0Z run, which was designated last night. Now, this morning, there was a 6Z run here that wasn't available for Weather Bell, but I did want to make a note here. This is what I was talking about with one of the model runs here that took it all the way over towards Houston. There was this instance to where 120 hours out, this tropical system, according to the GEFS with this ensemble model, this little run here, said that this could get below 990 millibars to in the 980 millibar vicinity, which would make it a stronger, or a mid-range to stronger range tropical system, maybe even a hurricane. Not saying that's going to be the case, because I don't think it's going to be the case. I do think it could be a stronger tropical storm if it does really start to get its act together with the moisture coming around. But I did want to make a note here that some of the little mini ensemble models have been saying that the potential for this to potentially strengthen further is possible. Now, if we take a look at the multi-spaghetti model ensemble guidance, or we take a bunch of other spaghetti models, there are a lot that really don't know what's going on. They're kind of just sitting over the main area to where the main thunderstorms actually are, but there are a couple that head back out to the Gulf and head into the general vicinity of the Deep South. So really something we're going to have to watch out for within the next coming days. And as more information comes out, I will be uploading more videos to tell you all as to what exactly is happening. Now, we're going to take a look at the intensity guidance here for most of these models, and you can see that most of these stay relatively below tropical storm strength. Anywhere within this green box right within here is indicated as tropical storm strength, 35 knots or higher, or 40 miles per hour and above. And so there's only 2 models that take it into tropical storm strength according to this little jam-packed area. It does not include the GFS or the Euro, but there are a couple other models that are saying that it could potentially stay as a tropical depression as it heads on through. So I decided to make this little graphic here because we are getting closer and closer, and I did want to start making my own predictions here to try and enhance my knowledge, because there isn't any point of trying to get better at this without actually trying. And as many of you know, I can be wrong sometimes, but I do want to try and, get better as time moves along. And so why not try this with an invest that could potentially become a tropical depression or storm, unlike, trying it for the first time out on like a hurricane or whatever. What I'm basically saying is this storm's not going to be as significant, and so there won't be as much impacts as, say, a hurricane, and so we might as well try this out. So this is my own tropical cyclone landfall outlook, and just by looking at this, here's your invest down here in the Bay of Campeche, and we do have what I put over here. I put this little possible area to where this could potentially make landfall. I don't really think that it will head too far east. I do think that it will stay right within this area of Louisiana, maybe Mississippi and Alabama, but it could go further east. It could potentially, if the wind shear basically carries it that way, and a lot of the steering steers it into that general vicinity. But I am seeing a lot of models that are saying that this general area right here, as well as most of their steering, which I think is plausible, that's what I'm thinking. Right within this area here of this possible is where we could potentially see the landfall of this invest as this moves on through. Now, let's take a look at the simulated radar here from the GFS, and just by taking a look at this, a lot of thunderstorm activity here in the Bay of Campeche, as we saw on the satellite imagery. But as this continues to move on through Tuesday, heading into Wednesday, even the latter stages of Wednesday into Thursday, a general broad area of low pressure starts to become designated, and that's when things can really start to get interesting. As this heads about, the tropical wave starts to head on through and combine with this general area of low pressure. And so we are going to have to watch out for this as this continues to unfold and how this intensifies, because as this moves on through into the latter stages of Thursday into Friday, you can see there is a lot of activity here with this system. You have a lot of heavy rain on the northern side of it, and it does even start to get into a lower pressure as this moves on through and gets closer and closer towards the coast. But then by Saturday evening into Sunday, it's fully on land, and then it continues to create heavy rain for portions of the Deep South into the southeast and starts to move on through that way. But the timetable here for the most part is that landfall is expected from Friday into Saturday, and that it'll hang around at around Sunday, moving on through into Monday. And so really something we're going to have to watch out for. Flooding will most likely be the main threat here, whether it's rain or storm surge, but still something to watch out for with that. Now, another thing that I wanted to make a note of is that I do want to mention the Euro model here. And unfortunately, the Euro model does not have simulated radar on tropical Ditbits. I know, upsetting. But you know what? We do have another way to determine as to what the Euro is thinking with the tropical system. And this is the cyclone vorticity. Typically with cyclones, there's a lot of vorticity, which means a lot of spin in the atmosphere. And seems how tropical storms, tropical depressions, or hurricanes spin, we might as well look at this for a good idea as to whether or not there could be something. And the Euro does say that there is a little bit of spin here near Galveston, Beaumont, Lake Charles, that general area. That's where the Euro thinks that this tropical system could potentially make landfall, which is the reason why I included a little bit of that area as well. There was some other models that were saying it could be heading off into that general vicinity, but it's another reason why I made my outlook for the landfalling of this tropical system a little bit further west into Texas. But I still don't think it'll be all the way over to like Corpus Christi. I think that the trough that will move on through here with the wind shear will be set over in place right within that area to the point where it won't go that far west. But I still think that right within that possible area that I designated, I think you could potentially see a landfall right within there. Now, let's take a look at the sea surface temperatures again. And I talked about how the yellows were were somewhat favorable for tropical systems to form or sustain. They're 26 degrees Celsius, but there are some areas here in the Gulf of Mexico in the red that is an upwards of 28 to 29, almost 30 degrees Celsius in some spots. That is very favorable for tropical systems to form. A lot of warm waters, a lot of moisture there as well. And so I think it's safe to assume that there will most likely be thunderstorms that will form here in the Gulf of Mexico. It's just whether or not they will consolidate is the real question. Now, I do want to talk about the wind shear here. I said that there was a trough nearby, and so I'd like to connect a couple of things that I was talking about earlier as I casually scratch my eye here real quickly. I mentioned before on the satellite imagery that there was a lot of wind shear off to the east of the tropical disturbance, and looky here, according to the model, this does seem as if there is a plethora amount of wind shear here screaming off to the east almost. A lot of this wind shear heading off east and then heading southeast here. But yeah, right within here, we already have the verification that is exactly what's happening right now. Wind shear as strong as 50 knots in some spots, all the way throughout the atmosphere. And so very unfavorable conditions. Seems how tropical systems do not like that. They typically want stuff all to itself with nothing really impacting its way of life, more or less. And so really something to make a note of is that we do have some strong wind shear that is basically holding the storm in place. If you notice how the wind shear basically heads a bit southeast again, and here's your tropical system. It can't move north because it has a lot of that wind shear basically holding it back. But it does have some wind shear, some strong wind shear to the north of this as of right now. But then as we progress later on into the week, the wind shear does turn into a bit more of a troughing motion. You can see how there's a big dip right here within the jet stream, and it does give a little bit of a window of opportunity right within here as to where this tropical system could potentially head off. And so as this moves on through, even though it does have stronger amounts of wind shear, you can see the tropical system does find a way to get within the areas of lesser amounts of wind shear, especially since the trough continues to head a bit further west. And so this does give it a general steering motion as to it most likely will head north. Don't think it will head west, as I said, because you can see how the wind shear tracks as it moves north, and then it heads east again over the United States. But the general track, the steering of this is heading north, so the tropical system will most likely follow along that same guidelines, and it will continue to head further north as it continues to move on through. But the wind shear does seem to play a major factor here with the formation of this tropical system and even the track. Now, if we take a look at the GEOS dry air model here from NASA, this will basically tell us as to if there is any Saharan dust that could impact this tropical system, maybe even inhibit formation of it, or even deteriorate the low pressure with this. And so there is a little bit of dust here. Areas within the pinks and purples, even into orange, it does show that there is a lot of dry air or dust. Not super high concentration amounts of it, but there is still some amounts of dust with this as of right now and into Wednesday. But the good news is by Friday, it doesn't seem to be that much of a factor. Most of the dust seems to kind of settle, and there is a lot of moisture that starts to consolidate within the tropical system. And so it's not exactly anticipated to inhibit this tropical system in any way, unlike wind shear. Now, I did want to talk about the tropical wave here and what I meant by that. And so we're going to take a look again at the precipitable water. This basically tells you how much moisture or water is in the atmosphere whenever thunderstorms do precipitate, with a lot of waterfalls and stuff like that. And so we do have the thunderstorm activity over here, a lot of moisture, a lot of water there in the atmosphere with a lot of these reds and pinks, and there even is a lot of water here with this with these yellows and dark yellows. But we do have a little area here of moisture that is entering the Caribbean, and that is our little tropical wave that's made its journey from Africa. Can you believe that this thing has made it from Africa all the way through in June? I can't either, but yet here we are. So this is your tropical wave that's heading on through in the Caribbean, and as this continues to move on through into the end of Tuesday into the beginning of Wednesday, you can see how this starts to become a broad area of just moisture in general. And so what I was talking about earlier with Invest 92L is this can either do one of two things. This can either A, fan itself out and become a general area of moisture as a big low pressure system, or B, try to consolidate all the moisture into one central area and become a little stronger tropical system as it moves off to the north, because this thing will definitely move north. All these thunderstorms will definitely move north. It's just whether or not it will consolidate into a tropical system is the question. But just by looking at the precipitable water, there is a lot of moisture that just consolidated because of that tropical wave. Now, if we take a look at the total rain accumulation here, according to this model run for the GFS, this is only preliminary. It's not official, but because we're still a little far out, but we still have a lot of rain that is expected with this within 6 hours. The rain rate actually in some spots actually get up to 5 inches per 6 hours, and that can cause localized flooding, especially with that with how much rain and the storm surge that most likely will occur with this. Not super high storm surge, but low-hanging areas definitely could see this, especially since most of Louisiana is below sea level. And so we are really going to have to watch out for the higher amounts of rain within a short time frame. And then if we take a look at the rain rate over 3 days, you can see that there's some areas that get an upwards of 8 inches, 9 inches, even 10 inches here within places of Mississippi and Alabama, right within that general vicinity. And there's just forecasted a lot of rain here from the GFS within the deep south, and so flooding will definitely be concerned. One thing that a lot of weather enthusiasts and meteorologists like to say is turn around, don't drown, don't drive into flooded roadways, because they can appear a lot shallower than they actually are. That's how water rescues happen. That's what you see. That's the reason why you see what you see on the TV and your news stations when you see cars trapped and stuff like that. And so all the more reason for you to seek higher ground whenever this stuff does happen, or even evacuate if you can. Try and do it that way. Now, last thing I do want to talk about here is the significant wave height from the GFS, and this just tells us how high the waves actually are going to be. This does not indicate storm surge. All right, but this does say how high the waves are most likely going to be. And so if we take a look here, this is on the beginning of Wednesday morning. The waves aren't really all too high, maybe 3 to 5 feet across the portions of the southern parts of the Gulf of Mexico. But as this continues to consolidate and move further north here from Wednesday into Thursday, wave heights start to get a little bit higher, starts to get up to 8 to 9 feet. Heading on through into Thursday into Friday, waves start to get a bit higher, a lot higher actually. 13 to 15 feet is anticipated, right around 13 feet, I'd say, these waves. And so, definitely will cause a little bit of storm surge here across portions of coastal Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and even Florida in some of these areas. But still something to kind of monitor as this moves about. And if this does intensify, we could potentially see stronger amounts of, or higher amounts of storm surge and higher waves attributed to this system. Well, anyways, guys, that's going to be it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with all the content that I provide. I will be updating you guys more and more on this system as this continues to get closer. A long video here that I had to upload here today, but a lot of information that I had to get out to you all, so I hope you guys did enjoy it. And please be sure to share this with friends and family and on social media. That would be greatly appreciated. I appreciate all the support that you guys give me. And yes, my name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.